بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم تسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Alhamdulillah that we're in the final session, session 6, in the discussion of the section of Sidi Abdul Wahid ibn Ashur radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa nafa'ana bih, his section on the book of the basic principles of Tasawwuf and that which guides to realization. And that we left off talking about the first of the maqamat al-yaqeen, of the stations of certainty, and that there remain 8 more to discuss, and then a few other lines before we'll finish the text bi-iznillahi ta'ala. And it's worth noting that when we discuss these stations, is that all of them were manifested in their most perfect way in our exemplar Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And this is one of the meanings where our Prophet said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, that indeed that I was only sent to perfect noble character. And there's other meanings that relate to this, but one of them is that all of the other prophets and messengers that came before him, they obviously all had good character. But our Prophet ﷺ, that he gathered all of those character traits that were dispersed in the various prophets and messengers, and on top of that perfected them. Meaning that each individual trait that was in each one of the messengers was not only in the Prophet ﷺ, but it was perfected in him. Similarly, just as we say the Quran is a summation of the previous books, and it is muhaymin, that it is overseer of the previous books, that likewise is the case with our Prophet ﷺ. And it is for this reason why his ummah is so special, is that through the doors of ittiba', of following the Prophet ﷺ, adhering to his sunnah, his way of life, which is very simple at one level, and there's a beauty in that. But at a deeper level, it's actually extremely sophisticated, and it's extremely detailed, and that it will fulfill the desire of the most philosophical person who yearns for deep meanings, just as it will fulfill the desires of those who are actually very simple and just want to know the very way that they could practice. And one of the things that we heard from one of our teachers, Sidi Abdul Hakim, in this regard is that it's precisely for this reason that we've been given the Prophet, who is a human being. A human being is someone that everyone could relate to. And he said that if you look at Greek ethics, for instance, and try to understand the philosophical ethics of Aristotle, for instance, if you read his book Nicomachean Ethics, even though Imam Ghazali took a bit from him, and that Islamicized some of what he brought to the table. But despite that, it requires a certain level of intellect to understand ethics at that level. But the beauty is that in the Prophet ﷺ, is that both the simpleton and the sophisticated person, the very intelligent and the simple, that they both can understand. And they have equal access to it because he's a living example. And we tend to forget that. And sometimes that people that start to have the doors open up to them for sophisticated thought, that they'll actually look down upon religious people and sometimes even religious scholars, and they'll claim that their discourse is somewhat of a simplistic discourse. But in reality, that's their own lack of insight. Is that the books exist for those that want to get in depth. But the point is that Islam as a world religion, the only true world religion that intended by God, is that it has to be accessible to everyone at every single level, in every single, from the most simplistic individual who has the least portion of the intellect to the most brilliant genius who's ever lived in history, and everyone in between. Is that there has to be equal access to all of them. This is why Sidi Abdul Hakim said as well, which I thought was a brilliant insight, is when he was asked that this quest that scientists have been on for the past 50 plus years to find the unified theory of existence, that he was asked, do you think that they'll find it? And his response was that no. And his rationale was that this would give people that had stronger intellect a greater advantage to attain the ultimate truth, which is in reality that we know is that there were some very simple people, in fact, that were ummi, that couldn't even read or write, that reached the very pinnacles of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to read a very interesting book, that I would read Al-Ibriz, Pure Gold by Sidi Abdul Aziz, the words of Sidi Abdul Aziz al-Dibagh, that it will blow your mind. And this person was ummi, he didn't read or write. And that the way that he thinks and the way that he's able to navigate religious issues and tie them into the bigger, grander picture is quite amazing. So this is one of the amazing aspects of our deen. And the beauty is that all dichotomies are reconciled in Sayyidina Muhammad. The inward and the outward, the dunya and the akhirah, and so forth and so on. And this is why that Imam al-Ghazali, Hujjat Islam, that he placed the book on prophetic character right in the heart of the Yahya. It's book 20. Half of 40 is 20. I mean, this is at the heart of the whole issue. It's at this point, it's at this hinge, is that the outward meets the inward, and the inward, the Yahya transfers from the outward to the inward, and that it's at this point where, again, all of these things that we appear to be disparate realms are gathered in him, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So, we talked about Tawbah. And we have several others that we need to discuss as well. Again, the point here is to discuss them very briefly, and these are things that need to be discussed in detail over a longer period of time, and one needs to follow up. One of the best books to follow up on, if one wants to know more detail about this, is to read Purification of the Heart by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. And that if one wants to listen to the recordings as well, that there'll be great benefit in that. So that after discussing Tawbah, we have to discuss khawf and raja, fear and hope. And fear and hope are sister virtues. Now, if we're talking about virtues, there's different types of virtues that we can discuss. We can talk about the religious legal virtues, and these are those of prayer, fasting, all of the other 5 pillars, everything that we do in relation to society. Then we can talk about the ethical virtues, which is what Imam Ghazali discusses when he lays down his ethical theory of the cardinal virtues and all the other virtues that stem from that, and so forth and so on. And then we can talk about, if we want to call them, mystical virtues, as that the maqamat al-yaqeen are mystical virtues. Now this word, when you first hear it, unfortunately we live in a time where we think of mystery and we think of Sherlock Holmes and Scooby-Doo. That we don't think of mystery in the true meaning of the word. The true meaning of the word of mystery is very noble. It means that which is beyond the intellect's grasp. It's a mystery precisely because the intellect in of itself can't grasp it. It's something that's experienced with a higher level of being, and in this sense the heart or the soul or the spirit or the innermost secret. And so that these mystical virtues that, like we mentioned in this morning session, that they stem from one's certainty. And so certainty is a precondition for all of these, if we're going to term them mystical virtues. And there's a hierarchy. Each one leads to the one that comes after it. Each one is a prerequisite or a building block for those that come after that. And we'll point to this as we move along. So we have khawf and raja, fear and hope. And these are simultaneously like 2 wings of the believers. Is that we have to have both elements. Now to me, one of the most beautiful things about our deen is that we have mechanisms in our deen that prevent all of these malignant psychological conditions. It is actually a major sin to despair from the mercy of Allah. Despair is a major sin. To me, that is so beautiful. It's like the scholars say, standing on the plain of Arafah in the Shafi madhab. If you stand on the plain of Arafah and you think that you're not forgiven, it's from the kaba'ir. It's a major sin to stand on the plain of Arafah and to think that you weren't forgiven. Allahu Akbar. That, to me, is just amazing. That likewise, that it's also a major sin too, that feels safe from the makr of Allah. And so that, meaning that you feel safe from God's punishment. And the state that you want to be in is somewhere in the middle. Now, when we talk about these maqamat al-yaqeen, that generally speaking, that there's a very practical way to attain them. The greatest way to attain them is to annihilate yourself in the love of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. and that to attach to people that are living, walking examples who have embodied these virtues and then can inculcate them just by being in their presence. That it does help though to understand it theoretically, without doubt. But you could understand this perfectly theoretically and have no reality to it. So the theory is the first part, and then it's about making it a reality in your life, this is why what just preceded was the discussion on mujahada. It's not going to be easy. That if you start with tawbah and then you try to make tawbah a reality in your life, that you really have repented, that you can pick up the book in the back here called Manhaj al-Abidin, The Path of the Worshippers by Imam Ghazali, and read what he says is one of the ways that you should start making tawbah. And I won't go into details because you'll actually be quite shocked at what he tells you to do. But that's how it begins. And I remember when we studied that, when I first came to Tarim, when we were studying that with my teacher, Sayyidi Habib Umar, that the next time we came to class, that he said that, did everyone implement that? Did everyone do that? He said, raise your hands. He put everyone on the spot. And some people were like squirming, trying to like lay low, right? The next day we came to class, he said, did everyone implement that? And he made everyone, he put everyone on the spot again. And I think even a third class. Because these books are not about, these books are not about, they are about theory to a very basic degree, but it's about practice, it's about living it. And this is the single most important thing that we can be trained how to do, is to live Islam. Is that, polemical discourse gets really tiring. Right? How many mubtadats are you going to refute before you're worrying about your own heart? This is what Imam Ghazali was trying to, reclaim. Was it, your heart is what's most important. That in the end, you're only responsible for yourself, and then to the extent that you can affect other people, if they listen, you're responsible for them. Otherwise, in the end, that you will only be asked about yourself and those that you're directly responsible for. And that recognizing that it gives you the breathing room that you need to move forward. So we have fear and we have hope. And that we have to have fear of the punishment of God. Because we know that He has majestic attributes, He has attributes of rigor. But we also have to have hope for His mercy. And generally speaking, while we're alive, that they have to be balanced. And scholars differ, that there are some that place more focus on fear, there's others that place more focus on hope, but the majority will say that they should be balanced, meaning that we have to have times of our life where the overwhelming state is that of hope. We have to have times of our life where the overwhelming state is that of fear. And each one is positive. And that generally speaking, in our context, when you speak about fear, people think of it in a negative sense. But we have to differentiate between fear of the nafs, of your soul, that's going to lead you to mope and be despondent and feel like you can't move forward and there's nothing that you can do, and just become incapacitated, and between a true fear of the heart, which will spur you into action. If you have fear that's not spurring you into action, it's fear of your lower self. It's not true fear. That just as if you have hope that does not spurring you into action, it's not true hope. It's hope of the nafs, of the lower self. And so both of these have to be there at the same time. We have to have fear and we have to have hope. And that there are people that worship Allah out of fear, just as there are people that worship Allah out of hope. And generally speaking, that hope is considered to be higher than fear in that regard. This is why we have an aphorism of Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, who said that those who worship Allah out of fear are like slaves. Those who worship Allah out of hope are like businessmen. And those who worship Allah because He deserves to be worshipped are the truly free. Those who worship Allah out of longing to be in His presence and loving Him, out of love for Him, that is the highest of all. Love is the most powerful emotion of all. As we see, is that all of the stations of certainty culminate in love. All the stations of certainty are prerequisites and building blocks to lead up to the station of love. So that it doesn't mean, though, that while we're striving to become a person that worships solely for the sake of because Allah Ta'ala deserves to be worshipped out of love for Him, that fear and hope, they always have their place. And then even after we attain that, fear and hope will still have its place. But fear and hope based upon love is different than fear and hope that's not based upon love. Meaning is that your fear and your hope then is directly related to the divine presence and either being close to it and proximate or distant, as opposed to being close to his abode of contentment, which is paradise, or his abode of wrath, which is the hellfire. And meaning that one is higher than the other for obvious reasons. So fear and hope, these both have to be there in the believer. And we could go into a lot of long discussions, how we bring about hope, how we bring about fear. But the Quran is filled with wa'd and wa'id. In the breakdown of Ibn Juzayd Kalbi of the 7 major themes of the Quran, 2 of them are wa'd and wa'id, which are Allah's promises and His threats. In other words, targhib and tarhib, encouragement and warning. And so that this is part of the essential discourse of the Quran. And generally speaking, is that when our Lord will give a warning, is that He'll give glad tidings after that. Or if He gives glad tidings, then He'll give a warning. And again, this idea that it's like 2 wings. Okay. So then we have shukr and sabr. So we have gratitude or thankfulness, and we have patience. And that these again are sister virtues, and they go hand in hand. That first of all, let's deal with sabr. Sabr, we all know, is patience. That we've all heard our parents tell us, sabr, patience. But patience is la ilaha illallah, one of the most foundational of all of the virtues, and it's one of the most difficult to inculcate as well. That patience is to your faith what your head is to the body. Patience is to your faith what the head is to the body. Is that there's no way of disposing of patience. Is that as long as we're in this world, is that we're required to be patient. And if you try, the opposite of patience is what's called jaza', where someone panics and they become so preoccupied by the moment that they respond in a way that's displeasing to Allah Ta'ala. And in the end, you are the one who is going to abuse your own self if you're not patient. Being patient is in the benefit of the patient one, and it would be really, it would be really nice to have a patience retreat, where we just created a scenario where we force people to be patient. And that, there's a bit of patience that we have to have when we come here. That, things aren't as easy as usual. The bathroom situation, the water situation, and so forth and so on. But really it is a blessing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts you in a situation that forces you to have patience. Now, one of the things about patience is that we live in an age of instant gratification. Everything around us is teaching us the opposite of patience. Have it now. Don't wait. And we live in a time where previously people would save up. No, now just buy it with a credit card and go into debt. No, just do it now and worry about the consequences later. That we live in a time where we can control the thermostat to, okay, we want it to be 72.5 degrees, not just 71. That we live in a time where, subhanallah, that it is very difficult to be patient. And people don't have tahammul. They don't have the ability to bear difficulties. I'm always amazed when you see, like if your parents migrated to this country, that the patience and the ability they have to bear different things. And I always use my mother-in-law as an example, that subhanAllah, she works full-time, right? She'll come home from work and I'll say, can we have some type of gathering? Absolutely. That she'll cook for everyone and she's happy about it, and she'll attend the gathering, that all her daughters will go sleep after, and she'll clean up, and then she'll go to sleep late, and she'll wake up for tahajjud before everyone else, and then go to work the next day. And you're like, how do you do that? But like why is it so easy for you, but it's so hard for your daughter to, I'm not talking about my wife, of course, her sisters, to wash a dish, right? The slightest thing, oh, it's too hard for me. Oh, I can't do it, right? But why could they do it? And you see people like this. It's tahammul. I remember I learned the meaning of tahammul in Mauritania, being on the back of a truck, that people's things were in it, there was a net over it, and that there was probably about 15 to 20 people in the back of this truck. And like all you have to hold on to is the net. And they're not waiting for you. Like they drive, tabarakallah, like really fast when there's no roads and it's very bumpy. And like it's all you can do, you're holding on for your life. And it's the most uncomfortable thing ever. You think, yani, you hurt after riding these horses, yani, la ilaha illallah. You're holding on for dear life. But the meaning of that is tahammul. Tahammul is that you're able to bear the difficulty or the pain of something while being able to function without skipping a beat, if you want to put it in lay terminology like that. What's an example of tahammul? Imam Malik getting stung 17 times while he's quoting the hadith of Rasulullah and not even cringing or making a move because he wanted to convey the hadith of Rasulullah, and to the extent that he started to change color because he wanted, that's tahammul. Right? Whereas we, just the slightest prick, khalas, right? And we're, people, traditional people had a greater sense of being able to bear what other people weren't able to bear. So tahammul, bearing difficulties, it's related to patience in that regard. But patience has three different breakdowns. That patience is related to tribulations. Secondly, it's related to acts of disobedience. Thirdly, it's related to acts of obedience. And we're required to have patience in each and one of these. And that the essence of patience is الثبات على الباعث الديني, is that you remain firm along the religious impulse when something arises either within you or externally to challenge that religious impulse. So, that someone goes through a tribulation, that this is where patience comes in. That it's when under sadmat al-awla, when the tribulation first strikes, what is our response? And that we need to train ourselves to have our first response be al-ruju' ila Allah, turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should be our first response. Is that a tribulation comes to us, a death in the family, a car accident, or we get hurt, or something of that nature, may Allah protect us all, that you recognize that this is from Allah, and that you respond with patience. And that people are tried in different ways. And that from the mercy of Allah is that He will only try you with what you're able to bear. And so that patience pertains to tribulations. And every single human being has tribulations. There's no human being that doesn't have tribulations. Allahumma, people have different types of tribulation. Some people's tribulation is greater than others. Others people's tribulation is less than others. And that I would argue that from a different perspective, when you look at it from the standpoint of reality, is that sometimes that people will be in a state of afiyah and well-being, like we all are in now, and our tribulations are even more in some ways than people starving in another place in the world. And that what I mean by that is that intellectual tribulations are a very serious type of tribulation. And I come from a people that I know very intimately, the mental chains that have been placed over their mind, especially when they think that they have everything and they're not in need of everything. I know that the way they are tormented internally because of their way that they think. And that until that they can overcome, right, those chains that have been placed over them, over their minds, and overcome their arrogance and so forth, is that they're going to be trapped in their particular way of thinking, and they're not going to be open to guidance. It's a different type of tribulation. And you could argue, no, that's not the case, is that all intellectual tribulation is much less than physical tribulation. Maybe, we can discuss that. But we're not to think that just because someone is lounging in the suburbs that they don't have tribulation. They have different types of tribulation. And that I know people that have 6-digit figures, but they can't sleep at night because they're just constantly tormented about, what's going to happen when they go to the work the next day, all the stress of work and this and that, and that they, even though they have a 6-digit figure salary, they don't have 5 minutes a day of repose in their heart, and it never stops. And this is one thing that I found is, to me, that one of the most beautiful things I've benefited from Mauritania, which I understand is the second poorest country in the world. One, no one there goes hungry, which is really interesting. Two, they're the most humane people I've ever lived with, ever. Even though they're Bedouins. Literally, 15 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, almost all of them were Bedouins. But they're the richest, most generous, amazing people I've ever seen. And that even though that they don't make a lot of money, is that they're all happy. I can't tell you the last time I saw a Mauritanian get gray hair prematurely because they were stressed out. Right? They're all happy. Now, I'm kind of romanticizing, over-exaggerating a little bit. They're not all happy, but most of them seem to be happy. I mean, the same thing I saw in Yemen is that the average family size in Yemen is 8. My neighbors in Yemen, 10, 11, 8, 9. They have just, huge families. The average salary is like, $100 a month, and they just, mashallah. They have hard lives, but they're happy. They have time to enjoy their families, right? They have luxuries that people living in castles in the suburbs don't have. And what I've just found is that it's a give and take. It's a give and take. And so we have patience when it comes to tribulations and all the different types of classifications of tribulations, that we have to respond to those with patience, and it's in our own benefit. Secondly, we have patience in relation to avoiding disobedient actions. Is that when you think of it in the realm of patience, it gives it a different context. Is that you have to be patient, you have to patiently avoid the haram. And that's part of patience. That there's certain things that each person is tried with in this regard, especially young people, that you have to get through that, you have to endure that. And sometimes that there's no solution except patience. And we tend to forget the very definition of a fitna, of a tribulation, is there is no easy way out. You are in that situation and there's no easy way out. Right? Both ways out are disaster. And most times, that when you're in a state of tribulation, that the two apparent ways that seem to get out is that were you to do that, it would actually make it worse. And this is the case, that this is often the case with relationships. It's the case with, people in their professions and so forth and so on, where they try to get out of that it will actually be worse than were they to have just been patient and dealt with it. Then the third type of patience is patience regarding acts of obedience. Is that the companions of our Prophet, when they took on a sunnah, that they would do it for the rest of their life. And so meaning is that you have to patiently endure the praying of the 5 daily prayers. You have to patiently endure fasting of Ramadan and giving of zakat and so forth and so on. We need to have a Hajj patience training before you go to Hajj. Right? You want to test you think you have patience? Go to Hajj and see. Until you go through all of these different scenarios, and then you'll get to see whether you really have patience or not. And that patience is inseparable from all of these different aspects of the human being, and that when you look at it through this lens is that you recognize is that there's something that we learn through patience that you can't learn in any other way. And on top of that is that this is the base level. When we're going to be talking about contentment, that you'll see that there's a different level to this. But the minimum is patience. And that there's a lot of good in forcing yourself to do things that otherwise that you wouldn't do them. The sister virtue of patience is shukr, is gratitude. And gratitude is of 3 types. There's the gratitude of the tongue, there's the gratitude of the heart, and there's the gratitude of the limbs. And essentially that it is for the affair of the believer. This is a hadith that we've all heard, but I want to focus on something important here. Is that our Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Ajaban, I'm amazed at the affair of the believer. It's all good." That if he goes through times of difficulty, he's patient. If he goes through times of ease, he's thankful. And in one narration it says, and this is only for the believer, meaning that our philosophy of dealing with tribulation, that it requires belief in God, meaning that if you have belief in God, that you will theoretically be able to respond to every single situation in a way that is pleasing to Him. Meaning that you go through times of difficulty, there's patience. You go through times of ease, is that there's thankfulness. And we know that the Sahaba, that they actually preferred to be in states of what? Of difficulty. Because they knew that states of ease were going to come. And then yet you will reach a state beyond that, where you will actually be thankful. You will actually be thankful for tribulations. Is that there are people who are actually thankful for tribulations. Ibn Ata'illah says in the Hikam that al-faqat a'yad al-murideen, that tribulations are the festival days of those who are seeking closeness to God. And meaning that because they see something else behind it. And seeing things being from God, which requires iman, faith, that allows you to have a very different perspective on tribulation. And again, we'll talk about that when we get to contentment. So we have to be thankful with our tongues to the extent possible that we can teach ourselves to always say Alhamdulillah. We have a whole bunch of du'as when we wear our clothes. Alhamdulillah alladhi kasana hada wa zaqanihi min ghayri hawlin minni wa la quwwah. Before we eat, after we eat, and so forth and so on. All of these different times of our day that we're taught to say Alhamdulillah. We're taught to show gratitude. The more that we can express that gratitude with our tongue, the better. But then gratitude also pertains to the heart, and that it's related to ta'zeem of the mun'im, and it's exalting the giver of the blessing, and understanding and seeing the blessing as being from Him. And so that when we're giving a blessing, even though we always thank people, is that we're taught to always see that as being from Allah. And this is also one of the great objects of reflection, is that were we to just think about the tree and the number of blessings that's in the tree, that we get shade from the tree, that we get wood from the tree, that some trees bear fruits, that all of the animals that the tree houses, all of these things, the way that it keeps the soil and down, that we're not to have trees and roots and the soil would be washed up. Just think about the multiple blessings in the tree, or think about the multiple blessings in water, or your parents, or anything of this sort. Is that when you recognize is that every blessing in reality in Allah Ta'ala's creation is interconnected. Imam al-Ghazali actually says, for you to be ungrateful for one of the blessings of Allah, it's as if you've been ungrateful to every single blessing, because it's all interrelated. That if you just take one blessing, the blessing of the eye, that what other blessings have to be in place for the blessing of the eye to be there? Is that one, you have to have a human body. Everything that's there within the human body has to exist in order for you to be alive, in order for you to be sustained, in order for you to have the blessing of the eye. That think about everything that needs to exist for the human being to exist. The earth, the greater biosphere, all of the different kingdoms that Allah Ta'ala has created have to be in place for the human being to exist. The earth has to be exactly on this perfect degree of its axis, not too close to the sun, not too far from the sun, orbiting at a certain rate in order for the human being to exist, in order for the eyes to exist, in order for us to see. That what else has to be there in the realm of the Milky Way and in the greater in our galaxy, that in order for Earth to exist, that were another planet to collide into Earth, khalas, we would cease to exist. What else has to exist from the other known universes in the world in order for our universe to exist, for our galaxy to exist, for our solar system to exist, for the Earth to exist, for human beings to exist, for us to be able to have the benefit of the eyesight? When you deny the benefit of the eyesight, it's as if you're denying all of these blessings, because they're all interconnected in reality. And this is why shukr is so important. And one of the things about gratitude is that it always goes on. Is that we'll be talking about zuhud, renunciation, asceticism. Once you die, there's no more zuhud. In Jannah, there's no zuhud. Right? You can just eat to your heart's delight and enjoy. That when you die, there's no more patience. Right? When you enter into paradise, there's no more patience. Right? You're just experiencing, enjoying. There's no more forgiveness. You're not making istighfar anymore. right? But وَآخِرُ دَعْوَاهُمْ أَنِ الْحَمْدِ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And their last prayer is, all praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Shukr and hamd remain. Gratitude and praise always remain. And it becomes perpetual. Is that you're constantly giving gratitude to our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. So shukr pertains to the tongue, it pertains to your heart, and most importantly, it pertains to all of your limbs. And that the highest level of gratitude is to use everything that your Lord has given you for its very purpose. The eyes have a purpose, the ears have a purpose, the tongue has a purpose, the heart has a purpose, the hands have a purpose, the feet have a purpose, your stomach has a purpose, your private region has a purpose. All of these things that Allah has given us have a purpose. And when you use it for its sake, that is the essence of gratitude. And that there's the last thing that we'll mention about gratitude, which is interesting, is that one of the words for an ingrate in Arabic is a kafir. And there's something interesting about gratitude and the asl of kufr, the foundation of disbelief. That it's as if that they go hand in hand. Just as when we talk about makarim al-akhlaq, in good character, there's something about generosity in relation to all of the traits of character. But there's something about gratitude and belief, and the lack of gratitude and disbelief. And it is as if at a very subtle level that the willingness of a human being to show gratitude, there is a correlation between that and the attribution of the various gifts that we're experiencing to a creator that brought us into existence, as if there's some type of subtle relation. And the opposite, that the unwillingness to show gratitude that relates to that covering up. And that you'll find is that once you get down into the depths of human psychology, at one level, at the most basic level, it's actually black and white. And then after that, it stems into a number of different manifestations of some of these tendencies that take place in the depths of the heart. And oftentimes that you will find people outwardly that are very happy people, they seem intelligent, but they're hiding something in the depths of their soul that's one of the worst sins possible that you can never see. Is that ultimately at the depths of the heart they might be totally rebellious in relation to their Lord. And outward that you can't ever perceive it. That what's behind what people do and what's hidden in the hearts this is something that's only going to become clear on Yawm al-Qiyamah. This will come clear on Yawm al-Qiyamah. That why this person is judged this way, why this person is judged this way. No one, no for absolute certain on Yawm al-Qiyamah is going to say that they've been dealt with unjustly. Even if we don't perceive what is the wisdom behind poor people starving in a particular place in the world, Yawm al-Qiyamah, everything will become clear. And that a really good article to read about what is called theodicy and the problem of evil is an article written by Sheikh Nuh Keller, hafidhahullah, titled that human suffering and divine wisdom. I believe that's the title. Human suffering and divine wisdom, and it goes into great detail about this. I would encourage everyone to look at this because it will present human suffering in a different way. And the believer that has simultaneously the ability to see things from both perspectives, that from the standpoint of reality, but also to give a judgment of the law accordingly. That inshallah we might touch a little bit more upon this as well when we get into contentment. So this is shukr, this is gratitude, and that is to use everything that Allah has given you for its sake. Now you could go into a lot of detail about what is the wisdom of the eye, what is the wisdom of the other body parts and so forth, but we'll refrain from that. So this takes us to the next mystical virtue, the next maqam of the maqamat al-yaqeen, the station of certainty, which is zuhud, which is asceticism, renunciation, detachment. That the reality of zuhud pertains to that preferring something that is more worthy over something that is worthy. And so meaning that the world itself is worthy. It's worthy that we take into consideration the world. Why? Because quite simply, you benefit from involving yourself in the world. But the idea of zuhud is that you're able to prefer something else that's more worthy over something that is less worthy. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. That the next world is better for you than this world. Once you understand as a concept eternity, and obviously eternal life is more worthy to work for than transient life. And that zuhud is teaching ourselves to detach. And the highest form of zuhud is a detachment of the heart. And that sometimes that in order to attain detachment of the heart, that there are people that went to some extremes. Because oftentimes that if you have a scale as such, and someone is engrossed in this world, that if you just tip the scale a little bit, it's not going to be balanced. You have to tip the scale way back here in order for it eventually to get balance. But in the end, that the goal of everything is balance. And that the Prophet ﷺ was the most balanced person in human history. The secret, one of the great secrets of the Prophet was his balance. Is that he was a perfectly balanced person. And that to attain that is not necessarily easy. You have to go through, different stages to reach a balance. And that again, sometimes you have to tip the scale in one way or another. But we should think about zuhud seriously. And zuhud is a solution to a lot of our problems. And the next time you think about the Mercedes you want to purchase, right? Do you really need a Mercedes? You can have a nice car. There's nothing wrong with having a Mercedes. Right? Allah has made the halal permissible for us. But there might be, something less that you want another type of car that you want to drive. So you can use that extra money to spend for a better cause. And ultimately Allah Ta'ala has balanced the resources amongst His creation. One of the aphorisms of Sayyidina Ali is that not a poor man starves except to the extent that a rich man indulges. And so that even though that it's permissible to take from the halal, at the same time, al-halal muhasab, that you'll be taken into account. If you didn't give thanks for the halal, you will actually be taken into account for it at that point. So the danger of the halal is whether or not you're going to show gratitude for it. But in general, to teach ourselves to be frugal is a good thing. There's a difference between being frugal and between being miserly. Miserly is something else. Being frugal is a virtue. It's a good thing. And it pertains to you and of yourself. Being generous in relation to other people or to those that you're supporting is also something good. But teaching ourselves to detach, cutting back a little bit. Right? Do you have to buy the new car? Do you have to get in this endless, drama of, okay, this family moved into such and such a neighborhood, so now we have to move in such and such a neighborhood. Their family sending their kids to such and such a school. We have to send our kids to such and such a school. This endless drama of worrying about what other people are going to think of you and all this and that. That zuhud is from the sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ. And it's one of his greatest sunnahs that people have left. Such that you'll be talking about religious discourse, but there's no, concept of zuhud. And that again, this is, the paradigm shift that we have to take. This is a virtue. Lest we forget that the poverty of our Prophet was ikhtiyaran. It was out of his choice. That if he wanted to, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he could have been a king prophet. He could have mountains of gold that would follow him. But he chose to remain frugal. So, doing what we can to cut back. We live in a country that there's just gross indulgence. That we are a very small percent of the world population, about 5%, but we consume anywhere from 25 to 40% of the world's resources. And that's something to think about. Okay. So then we have, after zuhud, is tawakkul, which is trust in God. And Imam Afroz was talking about this earlier. And that tawakkul, like all of the other virtues, that it's also combined of knowledge, state, and then action. And Imam al-Ghazali, when he talks about tawakkul, reliance upon God and Yahya, that he also discusses tawheed, which is belief in the divine unity. Because the stronger your belief is in divine unity, in tawheed, in the oneness of God, naturally the more tawakkul and trust that you will have. And so the fruit of the belief in the certainty of your belief in one God that the natural state to come after that is that you trust in God. And then that leads to acts, a'mal of the mutawakkilin, the various acts of those who place their trust in God. And there are many. And that there's a lot of details after that, that tawakkul pertains to procuring benefit and preserving benefit after it's procured. Tawakkul pertains to warding off harm, just as it pertains to that ridding harm from yourself if you already have it. There's 4 different areas that it pertains to. And that there's different signs in each area which indicate whether someone is mutawakkil or not, or if they're a higher degree of tawakkul or not. So again, in terms of acquiring something that's good for you, or if you have it, procuring it with you. That then warding something off, some type of harm from you, or that if it's already befallen you, ridding yourself of it. There's tawakkul in relation to all of this, that part of it pertains to medicine, locking your homes, protecting your assets, all these other types of things, searching for a job, or if you have wealth and saving, all of these different types of things, tawakkul pertains to it. The summary is, the principle states, is that you should have more trust in God than anything you do that you have in your own hands. Right? Your 401k that you have, that were this economy to collapse, which it's extremely volatile and could collapse at any moment. It could be gone, like that, gone. If you place your trust in your wealth, if you place your trust in your age, if you place trust in your looks, if you place trust in your status, or anything other than Allah, if Allah loves you, He will break that down for you so that you only place your trust in God. Is that if Allah loves you, He will put you through the ringer so that you learn how to place your trust in Allah. And even though you'll go through sometimes what's about to be an unbearable tribulation, but the wisdom of that is that you've learned the meaning of tawakkul, of relying upon Allah. And if you have trust in Allah, فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ, He will suffice you. And this is why that we can practically try to acquire this, is that when you come to class, the first thing that comes to your heart, have trust in Allah, that He allows you to concentrate in class, to benefit from class, to influence what's in class, to learn so you can teach, and all of these other meanings. That when you go to work, when you're applying for a job, is that instead of worrying too much about, that you have consciously in your heart, that a trust in God, that everything, He's in control of everything. And that if you do that, you will find wonders of a difference of every affair that you enter into when you consciously trust in God. That you will find ajaib, wonders of tawfiq, when you enter into things billah, for the sake of Allah, trusting in Him. And you will see things are made easy for you that are made so difficult for other people. You could have 2 people in the exact same scenario. One is placing their trust in Allah and it's just facilitated. The other person is problem after problem after problem. They're relying upon their self and not their Lord. And this is mujarrab, this is tried and tested. And that if you consciously do this, you will see the tangible benefit. And it will give you a higher degree of experiential certainty as well. So, we've now talked about the first series of maqamat al-yaqeen, the station of certainty, which takes us to the goal of them all, which is muhabbah, that love. And Imam al-Ghazali clearly states in the Ihya al-Din is that the whole purpose of the human being is to love Allah and to become beloved to Allah. Everything in the deen is living up to that. If anyone tells you that Islam is not a religion of love, they have lied. And they do not know their deen. That we tend to forget what is the epithet of our Prophet. He is Habibullah. He is the beloved of God. In meaning He's left us with a religion that if you follow it, that you will also become beloved to Allah. Love is the goal of everything. Love is the foundation of creation. It's why Allah brought this universe into existence. Even though it's a weak hadith, some say it's spurious, the meaning is true. That kuntu kanzan makhfiyan fa'ahbabtu an u'raf, that I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known. فَخَلَقْتَ الْخَلْقَ لِيَعْرِفُونِي, I created the creation in order that they may come to know me. That this is the purpose of creation. is that Allah loved to be known. He didn't have to create us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He loved to be known. And the foundation of creation is love. Muhabba is the ayn al-rahmah. Muhabba, love, is the essence of mercy. And the whole goal of creation, that in the hadith that we quoted before, in performing the obligatory acts and performing supererogatory acts, hatta uhibba. Hatta is a harf ghaya. It's a particle that means the end of something, meaning the very end of the path for us after performing the obligatory and the supererogatory is that you come to love Allah. And then everything after love is just a fruit. And that's why Imam Ghazali talks about uns, intimacy, where someone feels close to Allah, that they're feeling intimate with the meanings of proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not feeling intimate with His essence. And then you have longing, that when there's more of a majestic manifestation, that you long for those moments of intimacy. And then that the only thing that comes after love is contentment, is rida. And so that all of these other stations are prerequisites for someone to attain love, and love is a prerequisite for someone to attain rida, which is contentment. And the highest thing of all is contentment. There's nothing higher than that. This is the last station where someone is in a state of sheer contentment, and that they've moved up to a degree where not only do they not question divine decree, that they perceive all of the wisdoms within the divine decree, and they see everything as perfect. Were the veil to be removed, you would see everything in Allah's creation as perfect. Everything. A person that is getting tortured in the torture chamber, from the most evil and wicked thing you can possibly imagine happening to the most beautiful thing you can possibly imagine happening, if the veil would be lifted from your heart, you would see everything as perfect from the standpoint of haqiqah, from the standpoint of reality, from the standpoint of humankind being taken into account. There's justice from the outward, from the standpoint of the sharia, from the standpoint of the law. But from the standpoint of reality, you'll see everything as perfect. Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib said, لو كشف الحجاب ما اخترت إلا الواقع. Were the veil to be removed, I would only have chosen the way they really are. Meaning that he had it through his inner sight, that he had the ability to see things that other people didn't see. Because everything in Allah Ta'ala's creation, it's either in the da'ira, it's in the circle of mercy, or it's in the circle of wisdom. And that translates in the next world to other realities. And behind every wisdom is a meaning. And when someone starts to perceive that everything that happens in existence is a manifestation of one of the names and attributes of God. It's either a majestic name or it's a name of beauty. And that good and evil is only in relation to human beings. Every manifestation of Allah Ta'ala, even a rigorous or majestic manifestation, is beautiful. وَكُلُّ فِعْلِكَ جَمِيلٌ. Every act of yours is beautiful in reality. And then this gives us a whole different perspective to bring something to the table, to understand theodicy and the problem of evil. Is that when we relate everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the manifestation of His names and attributes, and good and evil only pertains to human beings, that when we recognize is it's not only about this world, there's a whole other world about which there will be ultimate justice. And that there will also at the same time be vast mercy shown, is that everything's put in its proper place, and we understand everything correctly. So these are the stations. And once someone reaches a state of contentment, that they're in a state of submission. And that a person who's content with the divine decree, is that the bitterest of the divine decree becomes sweet. They asked Bilal radiallahu anhu, that while he was being tortured on the hot ground in the Batha of Mecca, and Ubayy ibn Khalaf was torturing him, that he was asked later about why he was saying Ahad, 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 the one God, one. He said, what was going through? He said, every time I said Ahad, he said it just got sweeter and sweeter and more pleasurable. How do you understand someone who's shot by an arrow and they say, Fuztu wa Rabb al-Kaaba, I've been successful by the Lord of the Kaaba? What kind of person is this? That type of person that they're getting, going through a very severe sickness at the end of their life. Imam Ghazali mentions it in Yahya, he says, Ya Rab, mahma adabtani fa inna qalbi yuhibbuk. That no matter how much that you put me through pain, he said, my heart loves you. And that it's through rida and contentment that it opens up to have a whole new perspective on the sour aspect of the divine decree. The sour divine decree becomes sweet when you see everything being from your Lord. Because you understand everything He sends your way ultimately is what is best for you. Everything. The key is the way you respond. And that's why we've been given freedom of choice. How do you respond to the divine decree? Like Imam Afro said, that those that are worrying about their psychological needs, that most things they're not taken into account for to begin with. Were they just to respond to their situation in a way that's pleasing to Allah, in the minimum way that they can, that will be sufficient for them to reach the highest levels of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they choose to respond in a way that's pleasing to their Lord. And that applies for everyone in any situation. You're required to deal with your own reality. But if you tap into the prophetic sunnah, is that you will learn to live out of your own reality. You will be willing to get out of the comfort of your own reality, to force yourself to start living other people's realities. And that this is the meaning of what our Prophet ﷺ taught us, is that لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ, twice in the Quran. Perhaps you are about to kill yourself out of grief. The Prophet was so concerned for other people, all people. All people. This to me is a no-brainer. It doesn't even need to be said. And that when we were recently last year when we were in Toronto, and Habib Ali told us something, and he said, quote me on it. He says that if you are ever in a mosque, he said that if you are ever in a mosque and you hear people preaching words of hate and excommunicating other people and making takfir, he said, make a scene and walk out of the mosque, and Jummah is not wajib upon you. He said, and make a scene. This stuff has got to stop. This is one of the most serious crises we can possibly imagine. And that this stuff, it just has to simply stop. And that we have to do everything that we can do to. Who was our Prophet ﷺ? If he's going to move an entire army because a female dog is giving birth to a pup as not to disturb her, you don't think he's going to be concerned about a kafir? Seriously, right? If he's concerned about inanimate objects, right, you don't think he's going to be concerned about a kafir? Right? What is this ridiculous nonsense, Yani? Seriously. That why have we reached such a subhuman level that you even have to remind people how to be human, let alone religious? This is a given. That when you walk outside your house, whether it's Muslim or non-Muslim or anything, dog, swine, pig, horse, whatever it is, bug, you can't even kill a bug if it's not mu'thi, if it doesn't harm you. That, let alone a human soul, let alone, right? These things are givens in our deen. And the very fact that we're at such a remedial state that we even have to mention this, right, shows why we're as backwards as we are, and that this is why we're in the situation we're in. Is that once we learn to be introspective and self-critical, is that the Muslims are the khulafa of Allah on earth. And it's only because we're in such a decadent state that the world is in the state it's in. It's because of us. And Imam al-Rabbani, that he said that he reached a point where he saw all evil stemming from him. That's a high Sufi mashhad. But the point is that we have to see it from us. Is that we are the natural custodians of the earth. Until Muslims recognize who they are and what their responsibility is to the world, we're not going to get out of our situation that we're in. It's our fault. And we should blame ourselves for everything that is happening. That if we had fiqh and we had true understanding of our deen, is that all this pointing of fingers and all this type of nonsense, this is totally foreign to us. Is that Allah Ta'ala will always give us victory. He has promised us victory. Right? But we have a responsibility. until we can get over this thing in the Muslim world where the worst people are the ones that study Sharia. And all of our intellects are going to professions, even though they're fard kifaya, and they're honorable, and they're important, and people should use them for the sake of Allah. But until we can get over that, and we can put things back in their proper perspective, and we can understand is that the most important thing where we should be sending our intellects is into the religious sciences. And they're not mutually exclusive. And on top of that, we should be doing everything else as well. Until we can do this, we're going to be stuck in the quagmire of the situation we're in. We have to have an inversion of our priorities and understand these realities. So these are the muqamat al-yaqeen. And then we'll close with these last lines. يَصْدُقُ الشَّاهِدُ فِي الْمُعَامَلَةِ يَرْضَى بِمَا قَدَّرَهُ إِلَّهُ لَهُ. He is sincere in his dealings with him who is witnessing over him. And he is content with whatever the divine has apportioned for him. Allahu Akbar. We have sidq and we have ikhlas. And that بينهما العموم والخصوص, that they're slightly related but slightly different at the same time, and that all of sincerity is sidq, but not all of sidq is sincerity. Sincerity is that you choose only the best of intentions. The best of intentions you can make is to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in anything that you do, to worship Him because He deserves to be worshipped. Anything else, to do it for ulterior motives, to do it for your health, to do it for other people, that takes away from your sincerity. Sidq is that everything that you do, that you place your maximum effort in it. You have sidq, you have truthfulness of the tongue, you have truthfulness of your state, that you have truthfulness of speech, and then you have truthfulness of action, and then you have truthfulness of state. Imam Ghazali mentions actually 6 breakdowns, but we'll just talk about these 3. That learning how to be truthful in your tongue is important. We have to know what's a lie and what's not a lie. That being truthful in your state and the way that you treat people and everything that you do leads to truthfulness of act, leads to truthfulness of your overall state. This is why there's a hadith that says is that the person will continue to yasduq, to be sincere and to be truthful, hatta yuktab 'inda Allahi siddiqan, until they're written as a siddiq. Meaning that there's various areas of truthfulness that you work on until you become a siddiq, where you're sincere in every single aspect of your existence. Not only with your tongue, not only with your behavior, your entire state in everything that you do testifies to the realities of things. And the ultimate confirmer of truth is Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, and he attained that through his belief in Sayyidina Muhammad, which tells you how you attain these virtues. It's through our Prophet ﷺ, and through his waratha, and through his inheritors, that they haven't cut off. They're still here to this day. And that if Allah Ta'ala gives us tawfiq, something beautiful beyond people's possible speculations or anything they could conceive could be built here. Right here in Dar al-Kufr or Dar al-Harb or whatever everyone else is calling it. Right here. We have opportunities to build like no other place in the world. But we have to recognize that, and we have to recognize our success here is everyone else's success in other places. So that's sidq and that's ikhlas. These are essential to the deen, submitting to the divine decree. And then what is the result of all of this? يُسِرُ عَنْدَ ذَاكَ عَارِفًا بِهِ حُرًّا وَغَيْرُهُ خَلَى مِنْ قَلْبِهِ. By all of that, he becomes intimately acquainted with Allah. He becomes an arif. He becomes a knower, a Gnostic, someone who knows God. Which this is the whole purpose of existence. Is for us to know God. This is the whole purpose of existence, is to know God. We should be thinking about this in everything we do. Is that everything we do, as mundane as it could possibly be, what is behind that ultimately, if you approach it correctly, is it will take you to knowledge of God. And then you will be truly free. The modern world has lied to you if it told you that you can be free by following your lower desires. You will never, ever, ever be free by following your lower desires. You only will become free if you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then فَحَبَّهُ الْإِلَهُ وَاصْطَفَاهُ لِحَضْرَةِ الْقُدُّوسِ وَاجْتَبَاهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. For this, the Divine has loved and chosen him for the presence of the Holy One and made him of the elect. So if you do all of this, you will become mahbub. And that the muhib is not like the mahbub. That Imam Haddad one time saw someone, there was 2 twins, brothers that came to his presence, and Imam Haddad outwardly was basir, he couldn't see. that one of them that he praised extensively, and the other one he just welcomed kind of a little bit. And then as they were walking out, the one who was a scholar said, wait a sec, maybe he got us wrong because he can't see. So he went first and his brother went second, and the same thing happened. And Imam Haddad said, he said, what do you think about a person that is mahbub? And the other one, adu yatahabbab, in the Hadrami Lahja. The one's already mahbub to Allah. They're already beloved to Allah. Whereas the other one is still trying to become beloved to Allah. And so meaning that the true istifa, the divine selection, is when you become beloved to Allah. And people hear outwardly that they would do anything to be elected into public office and to be praised and to have their 15 minutes of fame and to be on TV and smile and take a picture with Obama and so forth and so on. But none of that in reality, if your Lord is displeased with you, matters. That all that matters, if your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out to Jibreel and says, Ya Jibreel, inni uhibbu fulan ahibba. I love so-and-so, so love him. And Jibreel will say to the angels in heaven, indeed, that I love so-and-so, so love him. وَيُوضَعْ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then this person will be placed, given acceptance in the earth. And that someone that reaches a station where they become chosen from Allah, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they become beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at that point, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks of you. There's nothing that anyone can do ultimately to take you away from that. And that when Allah Ta'ala says to Sayyidina Musa, وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي, I have created you for me. If that doesn't move our heart, then I don't know what does. I have created you for me. There's certain servants that Allah Ta'ala has created for Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that we should love them and to desire to be among them. And then the beauty that you will experience when the inner realm of beauty is opened up, this is where the tongue stops. There's nothing else needs to be said. All you need to do is take this seriously and tread this path. All we need to do is take this seriously, and we need to collectively tread this path. And then when things start to open up for you and you start to perceive the beauty and the tranquility and everything that goes along with it, let alone what comes towards the middle and the end, is that there's nothing that can be said. And then it's just about experiencing the beauties of what Allah Ta'ala has prepared for His righteous servants, and in the end that it's inconceivable. مَا لَا عَيْنَ رَأَتْ وَلَا أُذُنٌ سَمِعَتْ وَلَا مَا خَطَرَ عَلَى قَلْبِ بَشَرٍ. That which no eye has heard, or that which no eye has seen, no ear has heard, or that which has even come to the heart of anyone. So alhamdulillah, that we're very, very blessed to be a part of this deen. We need to take it seriously. We need to make mujahada, spiritual struggle, strive to attain this, attaching our hearts with love to our Lord and to Sayyidina Muhammad and to his family and his companions and the righteous of this ummah. This is a trodden path, and this is tried and tested. That one of the greatest proofs of all of this is that there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who have realized this deen. There's thousands of peoples. And in fact, there's a hadith in Sahih Muslim that they mention it in the chapter of Tawakkul, where that it was said that, to shorten the meaning of the hadith, is that there'll be 70,000 people from the ummah of our Prophet that enter into paradise without reckoning. And then in another hadith also in Sahih Muslim, for each one of those an additional 70,000. And they were asked about who they were, and then they gave the description. But this is a special virtue. What about the rest of the ummah? Meaning that, alhamdulillah, that we're very blessed, and that our opportunities are immense, and inshallah ta'ala we should take advantage of those opportunities and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up the doors of His mercy for us, so that we can all experience the beauty and the realities of what He has in store for the righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And alhamdulillah, that may Allah ta'ala bless us, give us tawfiq, and to bless us to be able to implement these blessed words. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove all obstacles for us in the past. Bless us to be able to devote ourselves entirely to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bless us to be from the muhibbeen and the mahbubeen, from those that love Him and are beloved to Him. Bless us to be able to have the very last thing that we say when we exit this dunya, bi la ilaha illallah, and to be able to respond to the questions of the angels, to be able to enter into paradise without hisab, and to be with Sayyidina Muhammad and his family and his wives, and bless us all inshallah ta'ala with with the highest level of paradise, where we gaze upon the beatific vision of our Lord, are granted the beatific vision of our Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.